Welcome back to Homa Studio. This is our third video in our Intro to HTML, CSS, and JS series, and in this video we're going to start covering CSS, Cascading Style Sheets. Now what CSS is going to do, it's going to start making this look more customized. Just like if we worked in Word and we kind of changed colors and we changed margins and we put things in columns and we formatted it and we changed the font, all that kind of stuff we can do with CSS. It stands for Cascading Style Sheets, and cascading refers to the way they are applied because of the nesting elements, which I won't get into right now, but that's where that name cascading comes into. So you could give something a style to something bigger and then work smaller inside. Just like with our code here, you can give a style to body and kind of then work smaller to the elements inside. So that's kind of how cascading style sheets work. But there's a lot of details that go into CSS. So one place you might want to go and check out, like we did before with our HTML, is W3 Schools. I like to go here, and they even have a nice little introduction about CSS in the tutorials because it shows you the syntax. Right here is the syntax, and typically what you'll do is you'll select something. It could be an element, it could be a class name. We're going to start with elements, but then we'll use class names. So they call that the selector. And then you have basically a declaration block, and you'll have multiple declarations in there. Now you can see there's color blue, color colon blue, and then a semicolon, and that separates from the next declaration, which is font size, and then it's colon 12 pix semicolon, and then it's all enclosed in these curly braces. Now it'll usually look like this. Not as much like this in one line, although you can put it in one line, but typically you'll see it like this. So this is selecting a paragraph, and then inside the curly braces, you'll see two declarations. It's saying color red, which will make the color of the paragraph red, and text align center. Again, this is the property. In HTML, they call them attributes, but here they call them properties. So it's property colon and then the value. And we have property colon and then the value, and then they're always ending with a semicolon. So if I go in this little try it yourself, you can see it made the paragraphs red and it centered them. And this is using something called internal CSS, meaning it's putting it in the head tag. Now we're not going to do that, but that's one method. And the other method is actually putting it in the HTML itself. Inside tags, you could put styles inside there. I'll show you the different ways, but we're going to use an external style sheet because that's the easiest way and the most organized way, because that way you can control all your styles from a separate file without mixing everything up in your HTML. Let me close this up. And the easiest way to get started with CSS is just try some out. And start with just changing your body, your margins, things like that. That's what we're going to do. And just to show you the different ways, I'll go in here, which would be inside the head element, enclosed inside the opening tag and the closing tag, and you could do something like this. You could put style, and I'll just hit tab, and it makes an opening closing style tag. And if you wanted to put a style for body, I'll put body, and I'd have to put opening curly brace, and I'll put background color, and I'll put a colon, and I'll put antique white, and that's coming up here, and then I'll put a semicolon. And that's one way to do it. It's inside this style element, which is inside the head, and I'm putting background color antique white. And if I go here, let's just see if it works. And it does. It changes it to an antique white color. And another way to do that, let me just take this out of here. I'll even cut it. That's one method. I'll just cut it, get rid of this style tag, get rid of this style tag, and you can put it right in the tag. And sometimes you have to do this if you're working in a college LMS or some kind of discussion forum where they don't let you use external CSS. Sometimes the only way to do it is to put it right inside a tag. But I'll paste this right inside the tag, the opening tag of the body element. And I can't just do it like that. I have to use an attribute. So I have to put an HTML attribute and put style equals, and then in quotes, the entire thing goes in quotes. So that's why this is all getting orange like that. I have to finish off the quote over here, and that should fix our coloring. So now it's basically putting a style inside the body tag. And I think that should work okay because it's written the way HTML is working. Let's just see if this works. And it's not working, so I think I did something wrong here. Style equals, oh, I don't need body in here. When you do it inline, you're actually not going to use you're just going to do this. You're going to do style equals background color, and you won't use the curly braces in there, and you definitely won't put body again. You'll just put the attribute of style, and then you'll just put what the styles are. So they don't use the curly braces inside here. So if I go and do it now, that'll put it back with the antique white. And again, the reason I'm not even familiar with doing it like that, because I don't do it like that very much. I usually use an external style sheet. So what we're going to do, let me get rid of this out of here again. And where you're going to do it is you're going to go into your styles.css. Now this is called style.css. And in your index, it's linking to style.css. Now, if you said, I want to call it styles, you could put styles there, but then you have to make sure this is renamed styles, or else it won't link to it. So they always have to be the same. So what you're linking to, just like anything else, has to be the proper name. So let me make sure that's the right name. And this is linking to styles. If you want to change that to styles, I like to do it styles because we're going to have multiple styles. But let's go into here and let's put body and then a space. And I'm going to put a curly brace. Now this emit abbreviation is coming up here in Replit. So what I'm going to do is just make sure I go in here and hit enter or return. And usually we'll break up our CSS on multiple lines like this. So this is the selector. It's selecting body, and it has a red wavy underline. If you hover over it, it says don't use empty rule sets. That's because we don't have anything in here yet. And what I want to put in here is background color. And I'll click on background. And for some reason, Replit doesn't put the dashed ones in here. So background typically uses background color, but I think we can actually just use background. So let's see if we could use background, but typically use background color. So we'll just put background right now. And I'll put antique white. I'll start typing antique white, and it comes up. And I'll put a semicolon. You have to finish off with a semicolon. Well, you don't always have to finish off, but it'll mess up whatever you have after that. So that's like a separator between multiple. It's like putting a period in a sentence. So make sure you put a semicolon here and a colon here. So again, just to review, this is the selector, which is selecting body, the body element, which is this. And this is the property, not like an attribute in HTML, but they call it property. So it's selecting background, or background color in this case we're going to use. And this is the value. It's using antique white. Now you can use hex color, you can use RGB color, and you can use color names. There's a whole list of color names that I'll show you later. But what's nice is if you don't like this color, you could click on here and change it. Now let's just see if this works first before we do anything. So let's go to our page and refresh it. And it should look the same. So that looks fine. Our color's the same. If you think that color's a little too orangey or something, you want it just a little lighter, a little more subtle, you could click right on here, go right in the middle. It used to be that you would hover over it, but now you actually click on it. And if you just want to make it a little bit lighter, you can make it a little bit lighter and then hit enter. And now it's going to use a hex color. It's going to use the 6-digit hex name. And I have a video on hex colors and all that. But anyway, if we go here and refresh it, now it's using kind of a lighter color. And you might think, that looks a little too gray. I want it warmer. You could go up here and make it a little warmer. Now it's getting back to the way it was. You could go down here and say, well, I don't want it as orangey. I want it a little more kind of yellower. You can try that. And we'll see what that looks like. And there's a little more kind of vanilla kind of look. And, whatever you want to do. I don't want to focus on the colors right now. But that's the background. And notice you could use background or you could use color. But if it's letting you use background, just stick with that for now. Background is a little more of an all-inclusive property that can use background image and different things. But if it's working, I guess just use background. But typically it's background color. And that works fine. And other things we can do in body, since we're kind of working from a large element, we could change the margin. Now, again, the margin is 8 pixels by default, but if you want to change that, and put margin. Now margin is the area kind of outside it. We'll talk about margin and padding. But right now, if we just put a margin and just figure 16 pixels is the default of the page, and let's just put 32 pixels for now. We'll use pixels. Now we have to use units when we use CSS. Now a couple things about the syntax here. You don't have to have a space after your colon. That'll work without it, but you can. But you don't need a space here. You could leave it like that, but just to point out, you can't have a space here. You can't put 32 space px. You want to keep them together. So you want to keep the units with the number. but you can put a space here or not have a space here. Now, since I have a space here, I'll be consistent and keep it like that. So that should put margin around my body. So when I go here, it should put a little more space around here. So that's margin going around our body. Now, what you might want to do sometimes is shorten the line length so you don't have really long paragraphs like that. Even though you can resize this, and on a phone it might look like that, you might not want to have a page that has paragraphs going across. You might want to have 2 columns. You might want to have a lot of different things. So there's going to be a lot we're going to do with CSS. But if you went here, I just have margin. Now that's margin all around. You can put margin on every size, which they call, just let me point out, this is the top, this is the bottom, this is the right, this is the left, and it makes sense. Now, it goes in order. It goes top, right, bottom, left. Now that makes sense. It's clockwise, top, right, bottom, left. But when you go to put it in your code, it doesn't make a lot of sense. And if you use trouble, TRBL, that kind of makes a little sense. So I kind of remember that, trouble, when you do that. So if you'd want to put something like, maybe you have on the top you have 32, and then on the side you want 64. That would be T, this would be on the right. And then on the bottom, TRB, you might put 32 again. And on the left, you might put 64 again. Now, that's a lot to remember to do it like that, but at least you're doing it on one line. So I could go here and do that. And now it's putting more on the right and left. It's putting 64 on the right and left. It's keeping 32 on the top and bottom. Now, another way to do that, a shortcut for doing that, is they do top and bottom first and right and left second. So if you did this, if you deleted these two, if you only had 2 values, this would be the top and bottom, this would be the right and left. So if you want to make this more, I'll just make it 128, I'll double it. This is top and bottom, this is right and left when you use 2 values. And you can use 3 values as well, although I find that more confusing. I'd rather just put out all 4 rather than do 3 because I find that more confusing. But there we're doing the 128 on the right and left, we're doing 32 on the top and bottom, and that's it. So that's our first style with CSS. And other things you could do with body, since body kind of controls the whole page, you can go in here and even change the font. You can use font family, font-family, put a colon, and for now I'll just put sans. I'll put whatever the default font is for now. I mean, you could specify Helvetica, you could specify Verdana, you could specify Trebuchet, whatever you want. Trebuchet, I think it is, if you spell it right. If you spell it wrong, it's going to use whatever the default sans serif is. So font family basically uses kind of first choice, second choice, third choice, whatever you want, and then the last one is sans serif. So if it doesn't have Trebuchet, it's going to use sans serif. And we do use a comma in between when we do that. So let's go up and refresh that. So now it's using a sans serif, and that's for everything because we put it in the body. And if we wanted to pick out certain things like the heading and make that a blue color, like this kind of blue color in there, I'll just show you. We can go in here and put H1 because we're targeting the H1 element, and we'll do the same thing. We'll put our curly braces. I'll go in here and hit return, and then I'll put color. It's actually not font color, it's just color. And I'll put, maybe there's an aqua. I'm not even sure. I'm just going to, maybe there's aqua something. Aquamarine. Let's see what that looks like for now. And then we can change that. So I'll put color, aquamarine, and I'll even put size. Now remember, the size by default was 2M, but let's put 3M. Let's make it bigger. So that's our H1. That's targeting this, my first web page element. So let's see what that looks like. And I'll refresh this, and the size didn't change. You notice that didn't change? I don't know if you noticed or not. For one thing, it's kind of light, it's hard to see, but I should have put font size, not size. Font size, font-size. And now if I refresh it, it'll be bigger. Although it's still kind of hard to see, I want to have it something more like that. So I could go in there and click on this aquamarine and maybe go more in the blue color, and maybe kind of go down here and give it more of a sea kind of color. See if that looks a little better. There we go. It was delaying a little. If you ever see this thing blinking here, it's kind of slowing down a little. So that looks a little better. It looks a little more like that. Maybe I want a little more blue in there. I could go up here and maybe move the hue more to the blue color and hit enter and see how that looks. That's not bad. See, I'm trying to match up colors that are in there, and not too bad. Now my spacing is kind of messed up because I have a lot of space in here, a lot of space between here, and we're going to go and change all that. But again, this is just an intro to CSS, so I just want to get us started. I don't want to throw everything at you, but basically what we did is we started creating styles in our external style sheet, which is linked to from here. And eventually I'll show you how to put that link in there. This was here by default, but really if I deleted it and I didn't have it in here, I could just type link and hit tab using the image shortcut, and it'll put style sheet and it'll put ref. And I could just put styles.css. Now, if I didn't have the link here, let me just point this out before I even do that. If I took out the link, now it won't use any of those styles, because it's looking to that style sheet for those styles, so it'll just go back to its default. But if I go in here and I put link, tab, and this is saying it's a style sheet, this is looking for the file, which is styles.css. That should link to that file, and let me refresh it, and now it's looking like that. So we're going to keep working on this and making it look nicer and adjust how it lays out, so that it kind of flows a little bit better, so that we can have a percentage on either side, so we can put these into columns. We're going to keep working with CSS. It's hard to do it in one video, but again, this is just an intro just to show you how CSS works. So hopefully this showed you how CSS works, and we're going to keep working with this file. So if you're following along, we're going to keep using this My First Web Page file. So this is the only CSS we created in here. We used a body declaration, targeting body, and we have 3 declarations in here. For background, for margin, for font family, which kind of works on everything because that's a large element that everything is contained in. And then we also change the color, the font size of the H1. And what we're going to do in our next video is go and reset everything back to nothing, so that we wipe everything out first, and then we could kind of build some of these so they're not adding on to the additional defaults. Because here's the default padding. You might not want your list indented that much, so you might want to have control over that. You might want to have control over the space before and after paragraphs, because if you just put headings over paragraphs, you can't tell which goes with which. And you can even control the size of images and put borders on here and shadows and all kinds of things. You can have this be a certain font and that be a certain font. So we're going to do all that with CSS. So it's a big area to get into. So I just want to introduce it a little bit. So hopefully that's a nice introduction, and we'll do some more continuing with My First Web Page in our next video.